Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Pretty Lonesome. This week we are back in LA, back in my LA car, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have you here. I have a coffee bean. I just went and got it because I was feeling kind of slumpish this morning, and now I'm trying to cut down my coffee intake, especially my coffee bean intake, because I just think I really should, because there was a point in time where I was drinking like 3 of these every single day. And so now I have this thing where I'll make coffee at home every day of the week until it comes to a day where I'm filming this podcast, and that's my special coffee treat day. So cheers. Anyway, so before we get into this week's episode, I have a few personal matters that we have to go through. And the first one is the most important, the most exciting, and I have to say thank you, because whether you're watching this on YouTube or any other streaming platform, because it is a podcast and it streams in multiple places, I hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and I think of YouTube as like one of the platforms I identify with, because it's where I post content. Like, this podcast gets streamed in many places and I have nothing to do with it getting uploaded, but YouTube is me, and I also post vlogs there, so it feels more like, I don't know, native to me, I guess. But it got me thinking. So I was like, 1 million subscribers, wow. And I know that this is going to sound really bad, but it actually made me feel a bit hard on myself for a second there. And I didn't want to like celebrate. I more wanted to like beat myself up. And I'll tell you why, and I know this sounds insane. But when I first started doing TikTok, I didn't ever think that I would also do YouTube, because I never really set out to be a social media person. Like, I just thought TikTok was this crazy fluke that had happened to me, and branching out was not even something I would think about. And it took somebody else buying me my first ever camera, and I remember the day that I got my first ever camera, and I was so busy with, I think I was still at university when they bought me this camera. Like, it was like the last few weeks of uni where I was like writing my dissertation, like the final push, and they bought me this camera, and they were like, when you finish university, take this camera and start to post on YouTube. I think that you should do YouTube. And so they bought me a camera, which was something I could not afford at the time. I remember getting it in the post, and the smell of it, like it was a brand new piece of technology, you know, that smell. And I just like admired it all day in my hands. And then the idea of starting YouTube was like kind of a strange thing that this person had told me to do, where I was like, I just don't know why that is necessary, or like, why would I do this? Like, no one wants to see that. I don't even know how to edit a video, but fine, like, I'll try, whatever. And so that was how my first YouTube video ever is still up. Like, that, whatever the fuck I posted is still there. And obviously it led to more of a journey for me. I ended up starting a podcast inadvertently. Didn't really know what I was doing, but somehow now I'm here. And it just got me reflecting on the journey. And I was being hard on myself, because I was like, I feel like I should have tried harder with YouTube at the start. I didn't really understand the landscape of social media. I didn't understand that because you're successful in one place, you can branch out and do another. I didn't understand how all these things like intertwined and worked, and I had no one to really point me in the right direction. So I was like, well, no, I do TikTok. Why would I do YouTube? And it just always, I had this very skewed perception of how this like landscape worked, because I had never really indulged in it. I had never really indulged in it. What I mean by that is, like, before I started posting on TikTok, I had never really enjoyed using TikTok. Like, I never really had it on my phone, and I was never a big social media user. But like, it really was very confusing to me how these social media platforms intertwined, and how you would go about creating a career or an image or a brand or anything of the sort. And I remember feeling so bewildered, bitch, I actually still do. But the reason I was being hard on myself is because I wish I had posted more on YouTube in the early days, because I thought it was boring, and I thought that it was stupid, and I thought it wasn't entertaining. But now I'm like, I just wish I had, you know? I feel like I could have been more successful if I had just understood sooner that posting is a good thing and not a stupid cringe thing. And I don't know. I have certain regrets, but then I was like, you know what? That is really ridiculous, and I should just be proud of myself. And I happened to scroll back in my YouTube channel to the first time I ever came to LA, and I vlogged it, and I called it LA Vlog. Most basic title ever, but I'd never done a video like that before, so I was like, this is the perfect title, because it's unique for me. I've never posted anything like this before. So I posted this LA Vlog, and it is me with my manager at the time, and we flew from London to LA. And during that trip, I had my first ever in-person meeting with the women at UTA. And UTA is my agency. What that means is they are the people responsible for getting me work and brand deals. And these specific women at UTA are kind of like my mums, all of them. They're my mummies in LA because they have kind of nurtured my entire situation since I very, very, very first started out. I think I signed with them when I had 3 million followers. So that was kind of why I came to LA, was to officially meet them and to film an episode of Call Her Daddy with Alex Cooper. And at the time, I remember feeling like I had already failed everything. I remember thinking, I don't remember my thinking at the time, actually. But my point is, in my mind, this was so long ago. The first time I came to LA for work with my manager, and I met the women who now I work with every single day and have worked with every day since, and signed to UTA. And like, it was such a nerve-wracking trip for me. It was my first time here since I was 12. So my second time ever. And I knew no one. No one knew me. And I was just so incredibly overwhelmed by what was happening in my life. I was very confused. I was very confused indeed. And in my mind, that version of me and that time in my life exists so long ago that it is almost inconceivable. So I scrolled down, like I said, in my YouTube channel to this vlog, LA vlog. And I'm watching it and I'm like, God, this is such a different time. And I was so young and at the start of everything. I went to go see when I posted the video because I never understand time frames in my head. Like, to me, that's 20 years ago. Tell me why it said posted 1 fucking year ago. 1 year ago. And now that isn't entirely accurate because 1 year ago, I was most certainly not doing that. In fact, 1 year ago to the day as I'm filming this, because it's the 2nd of July right now, I was in an extremely different place in my life. Oh my God. I was in a ball on the floor actually this time last year. It was awful. But so the video is doing that weird YouTube thing where it's like nearly 2 years ago, but it still says 1 year ago. But I was like, okay, regardless, it's almost 2 years ago that I was experiencing LA for the first time. It must have been very late summer of 2023. If you'd have asked me how long ago that trip was, I would have told you 5 years. Like, so much has happened and so much has changed. And it reminded me that I need to fucking chill. And I need to just give myself like this much appreciation and grace because I didn't know. I genuinely had no idea that that was that recent. And to me, that was really the start. So that actually reminds me, I have to text my old manager back. Guys, I absolutely adored that man. I still do. Let me text him. If it wasn't for my first ever manager, I want everyone to know I wouldn't be online anymore. I would have failed off the bat. For real, because it was like my first branded dinner ever. And I'm like sat there, I don't know a single soul at this table, so I'm by myself. And at this time, I had had a lot of emails from agencies in London trying to sign me to their books so that they can get me work, like brand deals and whatnot. And I was like, I just don't know what this is. And I start talking to the girl next to me at the dinner I can't remember who she was, but she was online, essentially. And I said to her, like, I feel so lost. And I keep getting all these agents trying to, like, sign me. And how do you know who's good and who's bad? And, like, what do the successful people do? Who are they with? Like, who are all these, like, big American influencers with? And I remember her turning to me and being like, so there's 3 big agencies, UTA, WME, and CAA. And in my head, I was like, okay, 3 initials. They've all got 3 initials, 3 letters. Remember that, because I was like, I can't remember any of these initials, but I remember that they've all got 3 of them. And then this guy opposite me, he was like, are you looking for management? And I was like, yeah, I'm like so confused. And he was like, I could manage you. And I was like, fuck it. Sure. Fuck it. Like, sure. And he was like, really? And I was like, low-key, yeah, you seem all right. And he was like, okay, like, let's just get lunch one day this week. Like, maybe I can just, like, help you a bit. And I was like, okay, thanks. Later that week, we go get lunch in London. He was like, I can just help you get set up. He was like, I can set you up, a business online, because you need that, because you now need to pay taxes. You need to register in the right ways. And I can help you filter out some of the noise coming into your inbox right now. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so we start working together. And then when the emails came through from big agency names in LA, I was like, is this something of interest? And he was like, yeah, you need to take that phone call. And I was like, okay, because I wouldn't have known to set up that phone call if it wasn't for him. I would have probably ignored the email. Few conversations later, a few meetings later, we signed with them. And I credit that entirely to him, because I would never have known, and I wouldn't have asked the right questions, and I wouldn't have been able to get on the phone call. I would never have responded to their email. In fact, I think their email was in my inbox for like at least a month before I was like, oh, by the way, this one agency called UTA like emailed, like, is that important? And he was like, yeah, that's really important. Okay, let's set that up. Anyway, and he was with me. He was the one that was in my LA vlog. He came with me and we met UTA together. And he was with me all the time. He was with me my first ever time I went to Monaco. He was with me the first time I went to LA, first time I went to New York. I'm pretty sure he was with me. Like, he just held my hand. I credit him so much for that. And I love him. And he was the best. Anyways. So basically, all of that, like, yapping to say that thank you for 1 million subscribers. I need to be a bit kinder to myself and realize I haven't actually been doing this for as long as it fucking feels like, and it's okay if, I don't know, sometimes I'm just like, why am I overwhelmed and confused? I've been doing this long enough to understand everything perfectly, and then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe not. So now on to the real topic of this week's episode and what I've planned and researched for you. Okay, this is going to be an intellectual one. Are you ready? So what I've been thinking about recently is ego and what it means to have one, because I think that I never knew that the ego was like a multifaceted thing. I kind of thought it was like a bad word, and like I know the qualities associated to people who have a big ego. I think we all do. Like, it's usually very obvious when you're speaking with someone who has a big fat fucking ego, and I didn't know it had protective qualities and was supposed to actually help keep us safe and happy. I always thought of the ego as something to kind of notice when it came up and to minimize as much as possible. And I didn't understand it for what it really was, because it's just usually spoken about only with negative connotations, like, oh, they have a big ego, blah, 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 blah. And so it stopped me from ever thinking that it really had anything to do with me, because I think I never think of myself, or I never thought and still don't think of myself as someone with like a big ego. I think if anything, maybe I'm a bit mean to myself. But the reason that I discovered the ego as something to think about was, okay, so to give context, I'd had this discussion, a group discussion with some of my friends. And in that discussion, I'd done something that was a bit out of character for me, which was defend the point that I made without listening to another perspective first. And usually when I am in a discussion with someone and they say something that is in any way different to what I am saying, and we've made a different point or we have a different perspective, usually the way I go about that is to say, oh, interesting, why do you think that? And the intention of me saying that is because I just want to learn. I don't want to prove I'm right. I don't want to prove anyone wrong. I want to understand why everyone says the things they say and then make my judgment if that is necessary. You know, maybe they were still at the end of explaining everything, in my opinion, wrong. Or maybe they just gave me food for thought. Whatever, or maybe they were right. Whatever it is, or maybe they were right in some ways and I can take it on in some ways, or maybe it just helps me understand my friend better and there is no right or wrong. Whatever it is, like, I think it's very helpful to operate out of curiosity rather than out of like conviction 99% of the time. Sometimes the opposite can be true. It kind of depends on the context. But in like interpersonal relationships, I think that operating out of curiosity and compassion is the most important thing. And so when we were in this discussion and I didn't do that and I just kind of said, and the context of the discussion was like very irrelevant, very minute, and it was just generally an unimportant conversation we were having. But the point is that I kind of acted out of character in this conversation and just like dismissed something that my friend said and kind of was just like, no, you're wrong. Here's what I think. And again, the context isn't like, it was nothing major. It was just the fact that I did that. And so later on, when I was alone with my friend, who was the friend that I had said, no, she's wrong. Later when we were alone, I turned to her and I was like, I feel like I need to apologize for earlier when we were talking about that thing and I like dismissed your point. I was like, I just want to like say I'm sorry. I hate that. I like my tail between my legs. I was like, I just feel like I should say sorry because earlier when we were having that group discussion, I kind of told you were wrong and I didn't listen to you. And that's like out of character for me. And I don't know, it didn't feel good to talk to you like that. And she was like, yeah, bitch, it didn't feel very nice to be spoken to like that either. And she was like, I've never seen you do that before. Like, you've always asked me why. And it's always been discussions. And it's always fun to discuss things because we always just discuss. We don't argue, we discuss. And like, that's not the first time we've ever disagreed, but it's the first time you've never asked me to explain my perspective and just told me I'm wrong. And she was like, why did you do that? And she didn't ask me, why did you do that? In the sense of like, she needed an explanation to forgive me. Because again, the conversation we had where I disagreed with her was like extremely like such a minor thing. And it was so irrelevant. She asked me, why did you do that? Because that's how we communicate with each other every single time. It's, why did you do that? Like, it's interesting for her to understand why I did that. And it's interesting for me to get to try and figure out why I did that. That's the nature of our friendship. So she asked me, why do you think you did that? And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, I think I know why you did that. And immediately I was like, well, why? And she was like, I don't want to tell you why. And I was like, no, you have to tell me why. Like, why do you think I did that? And she was like, I don't want to talk to you right now. You're scaring me. And I was like, no, what's wrong? Like, just tell me why do you think that I did that? And she was like, the reason I don't want to tell you why is because I think I'm speaking with your ego right now. And I don't normally speak with your ego right now. I normally speak with your soul. And there's a demon. Go away. And I was like, what are you talking about? The fuck do you mean? And so I changed my question because I could tell she wasn't going to like have that conversation with me for a reason at the time I didn't understand. So I asked her, well, what's the difference between an ego and a soul? Like, what are you talking about right now? Because I had never understood this before. And she explained it like this. She said, imagine your ego to be your lungs in your heart and they sit inside of your rib cage. And your lungs in your heart, that's where your soul is, and your rib cage or your ego is around your guts or your soul to protect it. But when someone has an overgrown ego, the rib cage is so like robust and thick that it eclipses the soul completely, and you can only ever speak now with someone's rib cage. You cannot get to their soul. And equally, someone with a healthy dynamic between their soul and their ego, and these things live in equilibrium, it would look like a regular rib cage. There's some space in between the ribs. They are there as a protective force, but your soul is there and you can access it and see it and light can get to it, and it's there. It's just behind something. It's being protected, but it's there and it's accessible. And then you also have people with fickle rib cages that are too thin and undergrown, and their soul is much more on display. And she said, those are the people who really don't fare well on Earth. They have a painful experience of the world more often than not. And that made sense to me. I was like, oh, I had never seen that the ego could be anything except disruptive. I didn't understand that it had protective qualities. I didn't understand that it was something that should be there, but you should be conscious of it and aware of it and learn how to work with it and for it to work with you, and what parts of you are and should be your ego versus what parts of you are and should be your soul, and what the difference is between those things. I'm going to say something probably controversial right now. Don't kill me. But I thought about this ego-soul relationship for hours and months on end. And I thought of one example among many, but this one example I think maybe might resonate the most, but it also might be wrong, so don't hold me to it. So this example, I'm going to read it from my laptop because I wrote it down in a crazed state. I said, okay, so an example would be, I think someone is hot, okay? And maybe they are they come off well, they're well thought of, maybe we've got mutual friends, and I meet them and we want to hang out. We want to go on a date, let's say, or even just to be friends. And something tells me this person's a bit off. And it's just like that gut feeling that maybe one or two red flags and you're like, you're a bit off. I hang out with them anyway. Age-old story. I'm like, you're a bit weird. Not in a good way. Something's clearly a bit wrong here, but you're hot, and I don't want to admit to myself that I shouldn't hang out with you, because I want to hang out with you. I know you might hurt my feelings or make something go wrong in my life, but I want this. I want to be around you for whatever reason, even though I know it's not healthy. So I'm going to do it anyways. And then at some point, it could be a week later or it could be years down the line, I get hurt by them. And then comes the yelling at myself part. The point in time where I have to tell myself off and say, I should have listened to my gut. I should have just known what I knew from fucking day one. This person was always, I had a gut feeling and I ignored it. I knew they were bad and I still hung out with them and I still fell in love with them and I still was in a relationship. Why did I do that to myself again? And it's always the same story. I've done this like 5 times. Okay. And ironically, here's where I got fucked up. Ironically, when I get to the yelling at myself portion of things, usually somewhere in my list of things that I should have known better about this person is that they had a big ego, or in some way maybe they gaslit me because they don't think they can do any wrong, or maybe they were defensive all the time about everything, and maybe it was always their way or the highway, and maybe they were emotionally neglectful. Whatever it was, all these things fall under, they are acting from having a big ego, right? If you are gaslighting someone, you must clearly think that your perspective and your opinion is so correct that you cannot take on board someone else's perspective. And obviously there is a motive with gaslighting, which is, control and coercion, which in and of itself, I think a big ego is quite necessary to desire any of those things, because it is your self-interest coming above someone else's, well-being or just life in general. And so ultimately, there's always a point in time where, whether I call it by this name or not, I will condemn that person who hurt me, who I knew was going to hurt me, for having a big ego. Whether I call it by the name big ego or any of the things that are driven by having a big ego, it's usually in my list of complaints, right? So when I read up about the ego, I was embarrassed to have to consider that perhaps this entire process had more to do with my ego than I thought, and the very thing that I condemn them for is also something I have to realize about myself. What do I mean by this? Is it manifests differently, number one. Maybe they were inconsiderate or disloyal, maybe they gaslit me, maybe they were defensive, whatever, mean, sneaky, whatever they did in the name of an inflated self-interest that leads them to dismiss others entirely, even their loved ones. I know I'm a perceptive person, and I know I knew about those traits in this person, at least to a degree, so why did I ignore them up until the point where they were unignorable? So that when I yell at myself for allowing someone with such a huge ego to be in my life, why is it ever at that point? Why did I not walk away much earlier, before I ever have to yell at myself? Is it because my ego was actually at play? And I never thought that this was possible, but hear me out. Your ego has a role to protect you. I'm grabbing my tits. Your ego has a role to protect you, okay? And this makes a lot of sense. If you were just here as a soul with no ribcage, you would be a puddle on the floor. You would be so extremely confused and in pain. You would have absolutely no understanding of the world around you. You would be unable to function in the world. Completely unable, right? So if we look at it as this kind of protective ribcage, we can see how that same function of protection could hypothetically run out of control. If you are faced with an ugly truth about yourself, sometimes naturally our first response can be to deny it or to try and validate it. If you did something that was selfish, you might try and justify that action, because it's much easier to try and justify the action than to ever have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I behaved selfishly, right? It's much easier to try and say, well, I did that because of this, and this, and, give it, reasons and justifications and deny it. Because it's very scary to see yourself as bad. And it is in your best interest and in your ego's almost only interest to protect you from that self-perception. Even though it may be true that you acted selfishly, and it doesn't make you a selfish person. It means you acted selfishly, and it would be much more productive in the name of being the good person that you want to perceive yourself as, to just acknowledge that selfish action, and therefore you are much more well equipped to not repeat it. But so often that is just not our way of thinking. It is more deny it, defend it, and not acknowledge, okay, yeah, I was selfish that time. It doesn't make me selfish all the time, and I'm not going to do it again. You would think that's more productive, but it's just not how we're wired for whatever reason. Because your ego's kind of role is not to let you do that. It is to encourage positive self-perception in the moment. And that can, I think, lead to denying your own bad behavior. I don't acknowledge the harsh truths about people. And that is why you hear me on this fuck-ass podcast be like, hey guys, he did something really bad. That should never happen. And for a long time, I almost saw that behavior in myself for a long time as naivety and kind of youthfulness. And I had to pull myself up on it, because I was like, but I know better. I knew better. I can't put it down to not knowing. I can't put it down to youth or naivety, because a lot of these mistakes I've made before. So what is the driving force for me in terms of this chronic issue I have with denying the bad traits about people around me? And I could be wrong, but when I was reading up on ego, I was like, I actually think it's my ego doing this. And I never would have thought that, because that makes it sound like now I'm the fucking problem. And it's like the intentions are very different here. Where the person who is, gaslighting and being dismissive and being cruel, their intentions are their own satisfaction, pleasure, joy, free will over yours. And that is a seriously inflated ego, because they believe that their pleasure, their happiness, at any expense to you, is worth it. Whereas my ego problem, I believe, was more based in overly self-protective denial, where theirs is rooted in, fuck everyone else, I'm number one, I'm gonna do whatever I want to feel good at everyone's expense. Mine was more, it's like if my ego could speak, it would say, I don't want her to see the truth because it's gonna suck. So I'm gonna make sure she denies that truth, because that feels way better and it's way less scary. But unfortunately, the way the world will have it these days is it's going to get to a point where the truth is undeniable and you are going to get hurt. So you see how it's not productive. But when I understood maybe that is the mechanism at play, and I could understand that something in me is trying to protect me from seeing something I don't want, but it doesn't understand that that isn't how it works. It's like, once I understood the ego is not a dirty word, it's just a part of how you function. And it is a protective mechanism. I was like, oh, it's like if it's responsible for how you perceive reality, whilst your soul is more of a psychic energy that Loki always knows exactly what's true and what's not, and your ego is responsible for juggling the weight of reality, it makes sense that when reality is something that is scary and hurtful, it might tell you in some cases, hey, look the other way. Hey, this doesn't apply to you. Hey, you're invincible, and yeah, you did see something bad about them, but it's not gonna happen to you, and you won't get hurt. You won't get hurt. And I think it's the same thing as when you were a kid and you were like, I would survive a plane crash. I would survive a car crash, and I would survive a plane crash and everything. That is obviously your ego, and it's very cute, and it's a very childlike way of protecting yourself from the horror of the fact that tragedy is unavoidable in its true sense. Tragedy, like a plane crash, a car crash, things that are not your fault, that may happen to you at any given point. That's such a terrifying and overwhelming truth, especially as a child, as an adult, but also as a child who's brand new to Earth. Obviously, you are going to be hardwired to believe wrongly that those things can't happen to you, that you would randomly somehow survive these things. I remember as a kid thinking that I would be able to swim from Calais to like Margate just because. I was like, yeah, I could. Like, if I had to, I could. And it's like, it kind of just like bends your perception of reality to make you feel safe. And I think it's an undeveloped defense mechanism that is not attuned to deal with the demands of the modern world, which is why sometimes it can lead to unproductive outcomes, such as dating the guy that if you had just admitted to yourself that he doesn't value you, if you could have just accepted that sooner, you would have walked away sooner. But because you didn't, because something tried to protect you from that harsh fact, you stayed long enough, for example, that you got really, really hurt. And it's like, I would have taken this pain in exchange for this one, but something stopped me from doing it. And it wasn't that I didn't know, it was that I didn't accept it. And the idea to me that the ego had a part to play in that is so interesting, because I had never thought about that before. And so then I read up on this thing called the quiet ego, which I will tell you what that is now. They argue like 4 main pillar points of what this would look like. Number 1 is detached awareness. The first hallmark of a quiet ego is detached awareness. Similar to the practice of mindfulness, it involves observing oneself, others, and the environment without judging or defensiveness. Compassionate and non-reactive observation of experiences allows individuals to relinquish control of the outcome of a situation and cultivates a deeper understanding of their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. And that was interesting to me because it centers around understanding, which is a dynamic that I obviously have with my friend, as I was saying earlier, when she was like, why did you do this? And I was like, I don't know. And like, it's a very much just like, why, and how, rather than you're wrong, I'm right, or anything of that sort. So what I said earlier about this lifelong struggle I've had where I see things about people and then I deny them and I end up hurt is something that I got sick of doing. And when I realized I didn't have to do that, it was the best day of my life. And I actually remember that day. I remember the day that I became aware of what I was doing. I go on a date with people and I try and prescribe to them who they are afterwards. I'm like, yeah, I think that they were, I think this one thing they did signaled that maybe they're kind, and this one other thing they did maybe signaled that they are compassionate. And I never can just sit back and just observe someone for exactly what they are. I always try and push it in the direction I want it to go in. If I want someone to be evil, I will twist them in my head until they are. And if I want someone to be good, I will do the same. And it's so stupid because it's not real. And I realized at some point that I can choose to just sit back and observe. And that the truth of what people are and who they are doesn't have to hold so much weight over me. I can go on a date with someone that in my head I want to be with. And I can see them do things that are unappealing. And I don't have to lie to myself about those things. I can just accept those things and observe them and hold them in their full truth. And when you're so deeply personally involved in everyone's behavior, so for example, when you're on a date with someone and they do something that's a red flag, or they say something that's a red flag, and you immediately begin to deny or to try and tweak what they said or give an excuse to what they said, that's because you are personally invested in them being good, because it means something for you. It means you get to date them. It means they get to live up to the fantasy. It means you get to be happy. And when I realized that this was ruining my life, I immediately changed it. And I was like, okay, next time I meet a new person, I'm just gonna allow them to be everything they are directly in front of me and either accept it or walk away. Just let them be. It's like I was always doing mental gymnastics for people, trying to mold them into something I needed or wanted them to be for my own personal fucking gain, so that I could be happy and I could date them and they could be perfect in my eyes. And it's like, if you just remove yourself from the equation, you'll be able to see them for what they really are. And if they do something bad or not attractive, that will no longer hold weight that you need to make positive. It no longer matters. It's just, yeah, they did this weird thing and I don't think I liked it. It didn't appeal to me. How did my body feel when they did it? It felt like it wanted to withdraw from them a bit. Okay, well, that's your truth. Sit in it. It allowed me to be aware without being defensive, without casting judgment, because suddenly there was less of a currency on it for me. And it was the best change I've ever made in my life, because now I have friends where and another thing is, like, if you start to do this and there are things about people that you don't like, and you stop making excuses for people and you stop molding their bad behavior into something better, or, you know, sweeping it under the rug so you can't see it anymore and forgetting about it entirely. I just know what I know, and I don't try and change it. And I let someone be who they are on any given day, and I let them change, and I let them exist in front of me without so much constant fucking projection. And it was genuinely life-changing to me. And I think that somehow my friendships have been healthier since I started to do this, especially since I moved to LA and I made a lot of new friends. And I've been doing this kind of since I moved to LA. And so I've never had to... So all of my friendships in LA are kind of based off this thinking of just like, you be you, and I'm going to just accept it or leave. Like, I'm not going to make you into something you're not so that I can bear to be around you, or so that I can have a fantasy of you that doesn't exist. Anyway, it also stops me from... It also, like, makes this process possible, which is the process where, okay, here's how it would go. Go on a date and I see a red flag. And instead of looking the other way or being defensive or making an excuse for them or trying to, you know, rationalize why they might have done or said that, I just accept it and I notice how it made my body feel. And maybe I still want to go on a second date with them. Maybe I still want to fuck them. Whatever it might be, I can still do those things. I can still make a decision that isn't in my best interest if I fucking want to. But I'm going to do it with the knowledge of, but they did do that one thing and I didn't like it. And then what that lets me do is when they do it again, if they say another thing that doesn't sit right, it's going to add to that feeling that I already had of, like maybe I don't like you very much. And what that will allow me to do is then no longer want to fuck them and no longer want to see them again. And this will happen naturally by itself, rather than me seeing them again, seeing that same red flag, defending it, making excuses for it, and just wanting until this person hurts me. I can process it in live time, and I don't have to force myself not to do the fun, stupid thing that I want to do. Like, see this person again, even though I know they're not right for me. I can still do that. But when I do it armed with the acceptance and the knowledge of they're not right for me, and I still let myself do the tempting and stupid and irresponsible thing anyway, it's like weaning myself off from them. Because I find that when I don't let myself do something I want to do, it breeds like an obsession with the thing. It is much easier to just do it once or twice, go on a few dates, and come to my own realization that, yeah, you're really not what I thought you were. You know, like, there are so many people that I know who will go on a date and then complain to me about the person that they're seeing within the first 3 months. And as they're complaining, they're making excuses and like validating why they're staying with this person. And it's like, why are you in the honeymoon phase complaining or being like, yeah, I'm going to change this, or they're trying to change that, but it's just like, okay, what the fuck are we talking about right now? Maybe I'm wrong. Like, tell me if I am. But I was just like kind of playing with that thought. Another essential trait of the quiet ego is the ability to empathize with others' experiences, comprehend differing viewpoints without losing one's own identity. This characteristic promotes a sense of interconnectedness and compassion, fostering meaningful relationships and reducing conflict by accepting diverse perspectives. The quiet ego is flexible, open to new ideas, and willing to revise one's own beliefs or opinions when presented with compelling evidence or differing viewpoints. Now, that's two different things. One, to have empathy and compassion even when you disagree with someone, and also the ability to revise your beliefs when you are presented with compelling evidence to the contrary, or to another anything, to something that is not what you previously thought, right? And a big part of this for me was my sense of self does not have to be impacted when I am wrong about something. And, I wrote something that's a bit more concise. Let me read it. Sorry, I write these these episodes, like, in some kind of, like, sleep-deprived state, and then I'm like, I'll just maybe speak more freely, and then sometimes I'm like, wait, I kind of ate before when I was crazy. Swiftness in changing one's mind when faced with compelling truth will lend to openness as a whole. You don't become someone who was once wrong and now right, but instead someone who intends to learn and learns often. And you are not once wrong, but a learner, and you will spend your whole life learning like this. And the version of you from before is no longer wrong, just different. And without the information you have now, it no longer impacts your self-worth or your sense of self when you are put in a position to change an opinion or a trait. You get it? Okay, cool. Basically, my point is when someone does present you with information that alters your view or your opinion, to be able to accept this without it having an impact on your self-worth by meaning that another version of you at one point in time may have been wrong or stupid or even evil is extremely valuable, because it means that you can just change if and when necessary. And there is no weight of self-identity on accepting a truth, which is basically exactly everything I've said in this entire episode, surmised into one fucking sentence. Equally, the ability to have empathy and compassion when someone presents you with an experience in which you don't understand is just an important trait of being a person on Earth. If someone has a life experience or has made decisions that maybe you wouldn't make, maybe you haven't made or couldn't make, and you don't understand them because you've never been in those shoes, to make any judgment on how they behaved or why they did what they did or the choices they made point blank is definitely an ego problem and should be addressed. And I think to deny someone's experience, for someone to stand in front of you and say, I had this experience and this is what I learned, or this is what I know, or this is who I am, and for anyone to look at that person and say, you're wrong, I don't know what that is. And, equally, I think it's important that, you can disagree with someone. They can present you with their evidence in an argument, and you can still say, I think that's wrong. Like, it's not good evidence. It's not reliable. Where did you get this from? It's your evidence and you believe it, but I don't. And that's okay as well. In those situations, standing firm in your belief is obviously not an indicator of having a big ego, for example, right? My point is, I don't even know anymore, to be honest with you. But the idea being posed to me that my ego is actually something that sometimes means well and has a bad outcome, and sometimes goes too far trying to protect me, and sometimes speaks before my soul, meaning sometimes I speak out of, I don't know, the need, for example, the interaction I had with my friend. I'm asking you a question because I kind of want to defend myself, because I think you've just seen something about me that is a kind of a quality that I don't like. What I really, really wanted in that moment, deep down, what I wanted was to understand from someone else's perspective, because I couldn't come to a conclusion on my own. Why do you think I did that? Because I don't like it when I do that. And if I can understand why, then maybe I can change it to act more in alignment with, who I really want to be. But there was like an outer layer of, but maybe we can find out why she thinks this, and then we can decide that it's a misjudgment. And then you don't have to deal with it. Even though you already kind of want to deal with it, because it's actually a problem you've even seen before, and you don't like it, well, maybe I can save you the trouble. A kind of thing. And it's like, even though I actually did want to learn, it's like, on top of that, there was a layer of defensiveness, even though I even wanted to learn. And it's like, this stuff is so confusing, because a lot of the time I think it can coexist, for me anyway, of this argument between self-preservation and self-betterment. And then also sometimes I ask myself this horrible question, which is sometimes I get worried that I want to make myself better just so that I can feel like a good person, rather than, and then is that not just ego in and of itself, so that I can go to bed and sleep easier at night and be like, I'm a good person? I don't know. All good questions, all good things. My coffee's warm now. It's horrible. Yeah, I'm going to stop drinking that. That's disgusting. Any other notes? Any other points? Girl, I don't know. Let me check. I also think that understanding that struggling with my ego doesn't necessarily mean that I have traits like lacking empathy and lack of compassion, and that you can actually maybe, and I could be wrong, maybe everything I've said in this episode is me getting the wrong end of the stick, but if what I've said is right, then a struggle with ego can also be being overly self-protective to the point of actually greater harm. And it can kind of go in that direction rather than the direction of I'm so great and people who aren't like me suck. Like, when I understood, like, that's not necessarily what an ego means, and that it has a lot of different roles, and it's not what I've always pictured it to be, it kind of made a lot of sense and enabled me to kind of see when I'm acting out of, like, the ego or the self-protection or the distorted, like, reality that makes things more digestible for me, and to notice when that's happening and to tap into, like, okay, well, what do I really know is true? What do I really want? And what's actually going on here? And to kind of say to, like, these protective instincts that maybe it's my ego, like I've said, or if I'm wrong, something else, but to say to it, like, hey, I can handle the truth. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Every time I post a podcast episode, I'm like, damn, I don't know. I'm not qualified to talk about any of this shit. I'm just trying to fill the work out on my essay. I've just got a podcast deal. Okay. I don't know who let me do this, and they should stop. No, don't let them stop. I love this. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's it from me on shit I don't understand. I'm gonna shut the fuck up now. I love you guys. Have a good week. Oh, my back hurts and I'm sweating. Oh, I love you. I love you. Love you. And I will see you same time, same place next week. Have a good day or good night. Love you. Bye bye.